Hi, welcome to Tinfoil Handkerchief Alignment, and today I'm going to talk about the fourth chakra, the heart, which is pretty self-explanatory as far as physical location goes, but it's in the center of the chest. The heart chakra is the literal middle chakra and acts as a bridge between the more earthly lower chakras, the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, and then the more spiritual upper chakras of the throat, the third eye, and the crown. As you would probably expect, the heart chakra corresponds to how we love ourselves and others, balance change, and how we create healthy relationships with others, including how we show empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. A balanced heart chakra helps you feel more at ease and more internally peaceful. That can look like finding balance of equal give and take, learning the difference between empathy and sympathy, and being able to discern when it can border on condescending. How we're able to forgive and move forward without resentment, and how we love ourselves and others unconditionally. Imbalances of those aspects in the sense of overactivity could look like neediness, people-pleasing, being too trusting, overly empathetic in situations that don't necessarily deserve it, or being egocentric in ways that could look like vanity or excessive pride to the point of not being able to acknowledge any faults or shortcomings within self. Blockages of the heart chakra in these same aspects could look more like disdain or contempt for others, feelings more along the lines of self-loathing, low self-worth, or lack of confidence, apathy, which in turn often means being overly judgmental or holding grudges. Once you balance that within yourself, that will also exude externally. That's your aura. And it will precede you and it will look healthier than when you're being overly critical of yourself or others. Personal growth comes from times of transformation, but starts with self-love. I believe that we can't truly love someone else until we learn to love ourselves. But most of us don't know how to truly love ourselves unconditionally enough to feel like our emotional battery is full before giving some of our emotional energy to other people, especially in ways that feel depleting, like connections that aren't emotionally fulfilling. That doesn't mean being a toxic positive who just says no to bad vibes and disassociates with anyone going through a hard time because it wrecks the mood. Sometimes those are the people who need the most emotional support. I find the difference lies in who's willing to seek help themselves beyond seeking the emotional support and reassurance of others. For example, if your friend is always upset with their partner, they've had multiple discussions about what the issues are, but they never change and the cycle just constantly repeats for years. You can be the emotional ear, but there does come a time when it becomes pointless to even listen if they're not going to do anything to try to help themselves improve the situation, which some people may perceive as selfish on my part, but I think of it as finding balance between emotional give and take. They have to be willing to heal aspects within themselves as well. Because generally when it's a situation like that, there's an aspect within themselves that isn't healed, which is why they keep sticking in that toxic cycle. But I could also interpret that as being a level of overactivity and imbalance within my own heart chakra, which was probably the hardest one to even start trying to balance out for me. But I long struggled with neediness and giving too much of myself to others. So it's a energetic boundary that I've really had to work on learning how to balance within myself. At the same time, they didn't have to take the advice and I wasn't going to force it. Though I did feel some guilt and a little like I was being selfish, I also had to take an honest look at whether or not the same people would be there for me in the same emotional capacity. In most cases, they couldn't when I needed less. So then it felt less selfish and more about conserving my energy for when I inevitably had to carry the weight of emotional burdens by myself. The funny thing is, even just from being able to discern that it was a drain on my energy helped me feel emotionally lighter, even though I was limiting myself to the weight I could share with others. Also associated with the heart chakra is the element of air. However, as far as astrological signs go, it applies to Libra more than it does Aquarius and Gemini. In addition to Libra, the heart chakra is also associated with Taurus, which itself is an earth sign. Now, I did also read that sometimes Cancer and Leo can be associated with the heart chakra as well. With Cancer being a water sign and Leo being a fire sign, though, I do think it's cool in the sense that that would mean each element is represented and converges at the heart. The elements themselves have qualities to restabilize and rebalance each other out. Both Libra and Taurus often have traits of balance, fair decision making, and seeking long-term healthy connections. Though Libra as an air sign is a bit more conflict avoidant, where Taurus as an earth sign is known to be a little bit more stubborn. Though both appreciate stability, consistency, and meaningful connections, which are also essentially traits indicative of a healthy functioning chakra. To be clear, I'm not saying that all Libras and Tauruses automatically have properly functioning heart chakras. I'm saying they have a higher vibrational baseline in certain aspects or represented within certain traits as they pertain to the heart chakra. Though, I do think it's cool that some of the indicators of an imbalanced heart chakra are also more commonly attributed to being some of the more negatively attuned traits within Libras and Tauruses, like vanity, people-pleasing, and stubbornness. Not trying to glorify the negative traits, I just think it's cool how it all correlates. And just because they're negative traits, it doesn't mean they always have to be negative traits either. If you acknowledge them and you work on them, you can better balance that out. So even if you are more predisposed to exhibiting some of the more negative traits of those astrological signs, as long as you're mindful of it, you can rebalance that out so that you're more attuned to the positive aspects of it. For crystals to help balance or stimulate flow within the heart chakra, I normally use bloodstone. This is a bloodstone worry stone. Like I said, they have a little groove for your thumb and you can just kind of rub it. Actually, I think this is bloodstone too, but it's faded a little bit. I'll also use green aventurine or malachite, but I may also use rose quartz. But bloodstone is actually like a super healing stone, and it helps reduce some emotional stress while promoting a little bit more creativity. So it does kind of connect to, say, the sacral chakra in that way too. But again, I love these worry stones. Like I said, my heart chakra has always been pretty blocked. So on days when I'm feeling attuned to some more negative traits, the heart chakra becoming imbalanced a little bit, I'll usually just fiddle with it for a little bit. But love these. And aventurine comes in a variety of colors. If you're using it for the heart chakra, you'd probably want to stick with green, but it depends on the overall application that you're using it for. Or you can use rhodonite, rhodochrosite, and emerald. I'd love to use emerald, but it's just out of my budget. As for smells, I usually use rose or bergamot, but you can also use jasmine. I'll use rose or jasmine if I'm using bloodstone, but I'll use bergamot if I'm using a rose quartz, if that makes sense, just to bring about a little bit more balance. To help rebalance the heart chakra, you can use Yum or F sharp. Just be careful with the F sharp. It's common in breakup songs, but can also help with emotional balance, empathy, and immune system functionality. Now, for those new to energy healing, it might surprise you to find that the color associated with the heart chakra is green. Green is also interesting because different shades can also indicate, represent, or help with different things. Overall, greens can assist with balancing emotions and help us center ourselves, just as the heart chakra is the center of the body, while also providing a more stimulating level of support without being too bold or overpowering. But again, that kind of depends on the green. Greens are said to provide supplementary support for temporary or sustained issues such as trauma or chest pain, more prolonged issues like gastric and peptic ulcers, or heart and circulation issues like angina or heart disease. I would also be inclined to believe that something like varicose veins would probably fall into this, would probably be more an indicator of an area of imbalance elsewhere in the body, like for example, root chakra, because root chakra is feet. As far as supplementary relief goes, bluer greens have slightly different impacts than some of the more bolder or truer greens do. There is more emphasis on helping with mental illness and menopause for the calming effect. I would also argue the communicative aspect would also be helpful with articulation as far as blue greens go. What I also find interesting is that bluer greens also provide a level of relief for conjunctivitis and nearsightedness. I also personally think that nearsightedness as it pertains to the energetic body could also be interpreted as something less of a physical ailment and more in terms of a spiritual sense of not taking the time to think things through or the larger impact of decision making and reactions in challenging situations. You could also look at it as the inability to focus, but from a mental perspective and not about physical sight. An inability to focus mentally could be an indicator of an imbalance within the third eye as well, though nearsightedness is often attributed to genetic factors. The heart chakra is ruled by the planet Venus, which represents the astrological house of material possessions, self-worth, and personal values. The planet of Venus is also representative of love, kindness, art, and beautiful things. And it can influence empathy, emotional balance, and artistic expression, which also connects back to the lower chakras in varying degrees. The moon also represents some aspects of the heart chakra as it represents the astrological house of emotional foundations and home and family life. Rebalancing the heart chakra is essentially leveling our energetic foundation. The moon also represents honesty and how we perceive situations or project emotional reactions in various aspects or situations within our lives. Especially with it being the centermost chakra, balance and healthy energetic flow here would help heal and restore a healthy flow and connection of energy between the upper and lower chakras, which in turn improves the flow of all of the chakras overall, bringing an overall sense of calm, gratitude, and balance while helping you improve your level of emotional intelligence, which helps you raise the vibration within you and around you as you attune to more positive aspects of the heart chakra, such as love, kindness, empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. Like I said earlier, I don't believe you can truly love someone else fully unless you learn to love yourself fully first. I think it's important to note here that there is a distinction between empathy and pity. Though it can be true, I don't actually see them as totally interchangeable. I think the confusion around the distinction between them, though, is why people are so emotionally confused in what it means to have healthy emotional support within relationships. The way I see it is empathy is being able to understand the emotions someone is going through and even being inspired to help. But pity is being inspired to help just because you feel bad for someone. It's not empathy if you're looking down at someone for what they're going through. Feeling bad and looking down at someone, those are two different things as well. And I think some of the confusion around that is what makes a lot of people too proud to express their need for emotional support to those closest to them. Advice isn't emotional support, at least not the only means of it. And trust me, I say that as someone who's always offered like a personal anecdote or story to help let others know that I can empathize with them. Though sometimes this can be misinterpreted as me trying to make things about me, when that's not actually ever the intention, but it just goes to show that different people have different ideas of what giving or receiving emotional support looks like. What I've also found is a lot of people don't seem to be honest about what they need to feel emotionally supported either. We all have different emotional wounds or traumas based on our personal life experiences, and we all handle things differently. Those wounds often have a strong impact on the kind of emotional support we need, want, or are used to. Unless you're willing to be open and honest with yourself, let alone feel trusting enough to be that vulnerable within your other relationships, then resentments would build up eventually from not feeling listened to. That's why it's important to try to have an honest but constructive and healthy conversation about where you hurt and what being supported looks like to you. But I mean it in more of terms of emotional bandwidth, expectations, and boundaries within relationships. And I say it like that because usually by the time it becomes resentment, everyone just kind of feels silly they've never had that conversation, or just perceive it to be that the other doesn't care, which can contribute to growing apart, which you could also look at as emotionally closing off your heart to someone based on lack of emotional support or uneven perception dynamic, not even just as an uneven power dynamic. But if one partner looks at the other with pity, there will be resentment on both sides eventually, which is why open and honest dialogue is so important within relationships, and keeping your hearts open enough to each other to allow for learning and growth. But growth only happens if people are afforded the opportunity to correct their mistakes within the relationships as well. It's important to recognize when they just don't want to change either, where they aren't able to provide you with the emotional support. It doesn't mean they're bad people. You can grow apart from someone, still be grateful for the time you spent together, and not hold any animosity towards them. But I also think that if you address issues as they arise through honest, open, and constructive conversation, those resentments don't build up because you're talking them out, right? It allows you both the opportunity to learn and grow together. If only one person is growing, there is going to be a level of resentment on both ends, right? Even if you're not being overly critical, constructive conversations are generally ways a person or a situation could improve, and I find many people perceive that to be a slight or a judgment rather than a suggestion. When it's perceived as a judgment, though, the person feeling judged often starts feeling defensive. If they're bringing it up, it's because it's bothering them. A compromise is probably going to prevent resentment. You just kind of get afforded more leniency in a situation for learning and growing within those relationships, I find. And to be clear, there is a difference in just being judgmental or a nag and expressing feelings in a healthy, constructive way. If nothing you do seems to be good enough, even if you are trying, you're recognizing the drain on your energy that it can be. Because if you're always feeling like you need to do something to impress someone who's never going to be impressed, that is a drain on your energy. Why don't you focus it on yourself and something that you love? And why does that person come down on you so hard anyway, and why do you keep going back and seeking advice from that person if that's all they do, kind of thing? Again, it goes back to the heart chakra in a sense of when you learn to love yourself, you're better able to discern when it stops being constructive criticism and it starts being more nitpicking just for the sake of looking for something to be wrong with it. Because if they love you, they should be able to be happy and supportive for you instead of trying to tear you down. And maybe that's just me and the way that I empathize. In addition to apathy, pessimism, and being overly critical or judgmental, other difficulties within relationships that can be indicators of imbalances within the heart chakra can look like jealousy, possessiveness, or codependency, which I perceive to be more imbalances of overactivity, but it can also look like being vengeful or petty, cold, aloof, or demonstrating more introverted or detached traits, which I would perceive to be indicators more along the lines of blockages within the heart chakra. In terms of overactivity when it comes to the heart chakra, I think the core of it is having a lot of love to give and it being directed to people or situations that don't have the same capacity for love or emotional support or the same understanding of it. When I think of love in terms of blockages, I think more about unrequited feelings, inability to improve the health of a toxic relationship, or difficulties letting go of a relationship. Maybe it's more accurate to say that when there is an energetic mismatch in capacity to love and individual perception of self-worth. Our actual heart organ, blood, and circulatory system are the main components within the energetic center of the heart chakra. They impact the overall functionality of our physical body and internal organs. It seems pretty obvious that heart and circulatory problems could be indicative of blockages or improper flow within this chakra, likely fairly severe and long term. As I've said previously, impotence can be indicative of sacral or even root chakra imbalances. Like I said in the sacral chakra episode, and how intimate moments can be full body connection points both internally and externally, which impacts the exchange of energy within that moment, usually in the form of energetic depletion. Blood similarly works the same way, but internally. So think of it as blockages within the heart chakra essentially cause poor energetic circulation within your body. Another good example of dysfunction of physical connectivity to our internal energy would be respiratory issues. Lungs, diaphragm, and esophagus are also physical components of the heart chakra. So an imbalance could look something like asthma, which can be temporary, long-term, mild, or severe, or emphysema or COPD. But respiration also impacts how we're able to communicate in things like our ability to talk, our overall physical and cognitive functionality. The ribcage protects our hearts and the vital core aspects of our bodies, but also borders on the solar plexus. Still within the energetic center of the heart chakra, but up towards where it borders the throat chakra, is the thymus. Important for fighting bacteria and infections, and also can have some level of influence on the development of autoimmune diseases within the body. In my opinion, autoimmune disorders would also be indicative of dysfunction within multiple chakras within the body, just as they can impact multiple physical aspects of the body. Rounding out the parts of the body within the energetic center of the heart chakra are the breasts, but I would consider pecs logically to be included here as well, shoulders, arms, hands, and fingers, all of which can be impacted by heart and circulatory issues and immune system dysfunction. Physical pain or feelings of discomfort in these areas are often early indicators for larger physical issues. I think that applies to internal aspects within the heart chakra as well, as it correlates to our internal energetic bodies. And when it comes to our shoulders, that's where we often carry the excess weight of emotional baggage we've accumulated over the years. Grief, anger, sadness, worry, negativity, and overall frustration. For me, personally, my heart chakra functions a lot better when I'm around authentic connections and people who actually love and care about me. Like I said though, it's all about finding balance and every situation is different. Physically, mentally, and spiritually, functionality of our heart chakra is vital to our overall health and can ultimately impact our perception of our own self-worth. Imbalances increase the sense of brokenness or missing pieces within us. As I've said before, as we work to heal those holes within self, negative energetic attachments don't stick to us. And then you're better able to maintain a more balanced energetic baseline even through more challenging times. Just because you feel broken doesn't mean you can't heal those pieces within yourself. From personal experience, I started feeling more whole, even though on a material level, I had much less and was in worse circumstances. But I try my best to keep my heart thawed out and not let it get hardened by unfortunate circumstances. All I can do is continue to proceed with good intentions, love, compassion, empathy, forgiveness. Hope it'll all work out one day. And I hope that it inspires more people to give love back to others as well. I've said before that I treat others the way I want to be treated and not the way they treat me. I try to show empathy and compassion despite rarely being shown any. But because I've healed a lot of those aspects within myself, I understand that a lot of what's happened to me is projections and unhealed spaces within other people that's preventing that. I also look at it like maybe they've never really been shown empathy and compassion, let alone a healthy and truly unconditional love. So I do my best to show what that actually looks like. Now, I'm sure there's probably some confusion as to how someone who's never been truly loved can truly love. But just because some people don't have the capacity to love me doesn't mean I don't still have a great capacity for love. I know how to give the things that I've never been given because I know what lacking them feels like. Having empathy is not wanting anyone else to feel that way. Compassion is understanding that sometimes forgiveness helps heal more than just ourselves. And I do think a lot of it has to do with learning to love myself and healing aspects within myself, which helped me with my discernment in being able to recognize what negative emotions were being projected on me from others that I was just believing, and what were actually mine that I was carrying from past traumas where I either didn't understand my feelings about the situation or acknowledge them for a long time. Mostly that was because I didn't have enough discernment to recognize the things that actually hurt me weren't the surface level situations. And as I've said before, the more healing you do within yourself, the more you're able to truly understand that for the most part, how other people treat you speaks more to who they are than it does about you. I also think that a primary cause of blockages within the heart chakra just comes from us not loving ourselves unconditionally enough to believe that someone else else will, more than anything. If you can't be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with someone else? Just like if you can't love yourself, how do you expect someone else to be able to love you? And some of that, as it pertains to loving yourself, is a matter of what you tolerate as well. If you have low self-worth, you're likely to tolerate more disrespect within your own relationship. I'm saying that because to me, it's more about showing myself grace as I learn and heal from situations it took me a long time to be willing to look at from an honest perspective, or in some cases, I was not aware of. But at least I try to heal, and when I know better, I try to do better. When I learned to love myself, it also set a higher standard for what I was looking for in a partner, not in the superficial aspects of money and lifestyle. I had been allowing myself to be devalued and disrespected for a long time within my own intimate connections. When I loved myself, my self-worth increased, and I was no longer willing to stay in draining situations just for the illusion of love, when mostly it just made me feel degraded, especially not just to say I'm in a relationship or to have a connection. To me, that's just not authentic. A lot of people absolutely don't understand that how despite this, I don't feel lonely. But as I've said in previous episodes, learning to love myself meant learning to enjoy my own company. I like to believe that my current capacity for love is indicative of a healthy functioning heart chakra. So even just as myself, I feel more whole because I'm not looking for things that I feel like I'm missing within myself, within other people. I'm working to build that within myself. So it's not like I don't still have work to maintain balancing aspects within myself. More consistency means more understanding from me, personally. But I could probably also go on a whole rant about how lack of consistency is a representation of low self-worth as well. So while I'll save that conversation for another day, I will reiterate that my personal opinion is that to balance your heart chakra, you have to love yourself before you can truly love anyone else. But a lot of that comes with showing ourselves as much empathy, compassion, love, and forgiveness as we show others. Understanding how to love others comes from understanding how our perception of it is shaped by our own life experiences, which can, in turn, skew our perception on what our actual capability to love is beyond a superficial level. So I hope you've enjoyed this overview of the heart chakra. If you're interested in booking any personal services, check out my Etsy shop or become a member on Patreon, where there's multiple membership tiers to choose from, Tinfoil Handkerchief Alignment, or check out my other YouTube channel, Tinfoil Handkerchief Tarot. Until next time, keep the peace.